Today on Mormon Times, from the tropical beaches of Samoa to the Emerald Island of Ireland, we talk faith, conversion, and what it means to be a member in these parts of the world.
I think Heavenly Father arranged special people in my life, a different time. And these are angels.
Angels whose testimony and family picture helped convert a young woman living in Taiwan, a simple missionary effort that transformed a life and generated a lifelong friendship.
It is a miracle that I'm here and that I'm able to walk.
And a miraculous recovery after being hit by a front-runner train. How prayer played a role in her recovery. Personal stories have the power to inspire, strengthen, and support. And that's why we want you to share your experiences with us. We were inspired by a post on our Mormon Times TV Facebook page written by a sister who endured countless trials after joining the church in Taiwan. This is her story.
My name is Allison Merrill, and this is my story. In Chinese culture, girls do not have high values. In my family, we have 4 girls, and we were constantly reminded how useless we were. It was a very, very tough childhood, very unhappy. Somebody knocked on the door, and I went to open the door, and I saw 2 young Americans standing outside, and they were soaking wet because it was raining real hard. They said they had a message to share with my family. That was the very first time in my life when my parents sat in the same room and nobody was getting hurt. They were not fighting, the furniture was not flying across the room, just that sense, that feeling of peace and love. I was 13 years old. My father told the missionaries not to come back anymore because he was not interested. When the missionaries left, all of those wonderful feelings were gone, and life was back to misery. During their last visit, they left a copy of the Book of Mormon. On the inside cover of the Book of Mormon, the missionaries left the address and the phone number to the church, and they said that, "Come find us if you need any help. We'll be your friends, and we'll always be there for you." I was looking back in my life, and I thought there was no happiness in my life. My whole life, all I could remember was tears. Except that 1 month, that short time when the missionaries came to visit, I really wanted that feeling to come back. The second time, I started to investigate the church from the sister missionaries. They gave me my very own copy of the Book of Mormon. On the inside cover of this Book of Mormon, there was a picture of a family. All of them had big smiles from year to year, and I thought, that is amazing. I did not know that a family could be together in a picture, and they all looked genuinely happy. And in their testimony, they said that the Book of Mormon has changed their lives and had brought their families so much happiness. And I knew that I wanted to be baptized, and I wanted to forever have that happiness in my life. Growing up in a family like mine, that's the kind of family I wanted to be in. I wanted to be in the picture someday, with children, with a husband, together, and everybody smiled. I have a fairy tale ending to my story. The gospel had changed my life and my view on family. I know that things can be better. When I was a little kid, I was garbage in my parents' eyes. But now I know I'm still a girl, I'm still a daughter, but I have another father who cares and who doesn't think I'm garbage. I mean, life is still full of challenges right now, but with the gospel in my life, I have hope, and I know that I have a Heavenly Father who is always there.
Well, Allison served a full-time mission in Taiwan, and eventually her 3 sisters joined the church. And while Allison served, people she described as earthly angels helped sustain her. Christy Metcalf, one of those angels in Allison's life. And Christy, thanks for being with us. And it was your picture of your family that made its way in that Book of Mormon all the way to Taiwan. How did it end up there? Do you know how that worked?
Well, I think it was they sent it to the missionaries that were going out from our ward.
Okay.
And they sent boxes out because we bought 2 boxes, and they had, what, 30 books to a box.
So it made its way across the ocean.
It made its way to Taiwan and some other places, too.
That's wonderful. And Allison said she was so touched by seeing that picture of your family, reading the testimony inside, that she asked the missionaries for your address. What kind of relationship did you have with her after that?
We wrote to her. We wrote to her at least once a month. I wrote to her, I think it was.
And you even helped support her on her mission.
We did.
What a wonderful thing to do.
We did, because we didn't have any missionaries. Our son was very young. We have 3 girls and 1 son.
So when and how did you finally meet? When did that all happen?
Years, what, 24 years
Really?
later, something like that, yes.
Wow.
We got to meet in person, but we wrote. All the time we wrote. Because she went to Texas first and wrote from Texas, and then she went to Provo. When she went to Provo, was when she called.
And you really became a second family to her, almost.
I suppose. I didn't know we meant that much to her, you know?
Now, is Allison the only one that you heard back from? Because you sent out lots of copies of the Book of Mormon with missionaries that went all over the place. Did you hear back from some others?
I did. One from Portugal, Fatima Bastos.
Wow.
And she wrote to us too, and we wrote back to her. She did move to another country.
That's wonderful. What do you think, what suggestions from your experience do you think you could offer that would help us all maybe look for and have some of these missionary moments like you did?
I've always just been open to anything. I talk to people all the time. My children get very embarrassed by it. And it leads to lots of different things. I've met somebody on the computer and they joined the church. My girlfriend from 50 years ago when I went to grade school, I haven't seen in 50 years. We finally got up 50 years later, and she had joined the church. Wow. Because I had taken her with me when I was very young.
That's great. So you can be bold, open your mouth, share online. You says that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And also invite your friends. Just invite.
Talk to people. I would say be friendly to anybody. And I have lots of friends who aren't LDS, who we make, I think, a great impact on for the church. You know, the people tell other people. We have friends who are Mormon who are wonderful.
That's great. Thanks for the impact you've made on Allison's life and many others.
We love Allison.
And for sharing the suggestions with us. Christy Metcalf, glad you're here today.
Thank you.
Coming up, inspiring missionary efforts on the island of Samoa.
We're taught to do in the scriptures is to choose God above everything, and that's what he did.
Finding and teaching new members about the gospel. And what should have been a tragedy becomes a miraculous recovery. How prayer sustains a family after a terrible accident. There are more than 52,000 full-time missionaries serving around the world. Each one returns home with unique experiences of how the conversion of others strengthened their faith. Well, we want to share some of those stories to help strengthen yours. Here's this week's Missionary Moment.
I'm Sam Atoa, and I served in the Samoa Apia mission. It was a great experience because my dad was born there. I have that heritage, but I knew nothing about it. O te ilo ai moni mafa maoni le kalesia. O te ilo fo'i o Yosesamitas perfetta le atua. To actually experience the culture was amazing, and I think some of the most memorable moments are when people accept the gospel and you see a change in their lives. We taught one investigator, his name was Caleb, he's 21 years old, and his dad is actually a pastor of a Pentecostal church. Normally lives with his dad, the pastor, but he had gotten in a fight with a brother of his, and he decided to go stay with his grandma for a little bit, and he'd been there about a month. We walked by his house every day. Never before we thought we'd turn at this house. It just didn't look like people who would accept the gospel, but we felt a prompting that we should, so we did. We turned at the house, and he gladly accepted us. And growing up in this anti-Mormon house, he had a lot of different questions about doctrines of the church. He liked the answers that we gave him, and he wanted to continue learning about the gospel. He ended up getting baptized. He got kicked out of his house, and luckily the bishop was kind enough to take him in. And his testimony really grew from that decision that he made. You could see a difference in his countenance. You could see this glow about him. And, he's been a member about a year now, and he's actually now preparing to serve a mission. It was just an awesome experience to be able to see someone embrace the gospel so well and to find so much joy in it, enough to turn away from, the life that he had, the great things that he had, to serve Christ and to follow him. Amen.
Thank you, Sam, for sharing your testimony. If you're a recently returned missionary, we'd love to hear about your favorite missionary moment. Just email us at mormontimestv@ksl.com. Well, from the sunny islands of Samoa to the lush green lands of Ireland, members everywhere are living faithful lives. Up next, we'll Skype with a sister living in Cork, Ireland, to see what it's like to be a member there. And to look back at the building of the 14th and 15th temples in the church.
The Ogden and Provo temples were built to alleviate the overcrowding problems they were having in the Logan, Salt Lake, and Manti temples.
Find out why temple work increased significantly thanks in part to the unique design of these two temples.
That was what I was most worried about, was if the kids were okay, and if I'd hurt anybody. I didn't know what had happened at all.
Clara Lewis was driving with her two daughters last November to pick up her son at a friend's house in Kaysville. They'd never made it there. Their car was hit by a front-runner train. It could have been a tragedy, but instead, Clara Lewis says it's a miracle that she and her daughters are alive. The Lewises shared their story with Carol Makita.
Inside this car, Clara Lewis and her two young daughters were literally inches from death. Clara was picking up her son and had never driven across these train tracks. She doesn't remember what happened. Her husband remembers where he was last November 14th when he got the news.
Started to do Christmas lights and was actually up on the roof, and I saw the first police officer pull into the circle.
The children were okay, but Clara suffered a broken collarbone, shoulder blade, and 2 ribs on her left side. Much worse than that, a skull fracture with traumatic brain injury on her right side.
Responders arrived on the scene. They paralyzed me enough so that they could intubate me, and then I wouldn't suffer any more brain damage or brain trauma.
She remained in a coma for 3.5 weeks, but doctors do not believe she will ever remember the accident.
I do like to hear about it because it's hard to connect how serious it was, and because I don't have any understanding of how bad it was, then to understand why it's such a miracle that I'm still here. So then, because knowing how bad it was and seeing pictures of how bad I was, then it does kind of start to make sense. Oh yeah, it is a miracle that I'm here and that I'm able to walk, and they didn't think I'd have function of my whole left side.
This is only Clara's 7th appointment in physical therapy. Doctors are amazed. She goes from here to occupational therapy and then speech therapy.
Keep touching down. High-level balance exercises help Clara deal with constant dizziness. Doctors say her brain is unlocking and her strength will come back.
She's got one of the best attitudes I've ever met of anybody. She does anything and everything.
Clara came home December 29th to family members, friends, and neighbors who had taken over childcare, cooking, cleaning, and laundry. She says she felt people's prayers. Her son Taylor attended a special church meeting.
My oldest was up with my dad kind of in the chapel, and he turned around and he looked and he said, "Look, Grandpa, look at all these people. They love my mother." So, and that was neat that he could see that yes, this is, all these people love my mom and they're going to pray and help so that my mom will get better. And I think he really learned the importance of prayer from that.
The Lewises cling to each other in gratitude. The Kaysville Police Department leads an ongoing investigation into the accident. For Mormon Times, this is Carol Makita.
Today we continue our look at church members around the world venturing to the other side of the globe to visit with Marguerite Good, who's been a member in her native country for 28 years. She lives in the land known as the Emerald Isle, gorgeous green Ireland with its miles of pasture, ancient castles, and LDS church heritage that dates back to 1840 when missionary John Taylor preached in Belfast. Well, today there are 2,890 members of our faith in Ireland, and Marguerite is a longtime member of the congregation in Cork. And thanks for Skyping with us today, Marguerite. So glad you could be with us. Tell us what it's like to be LDS in Ireland.
I suppose it's a little different, you know. Most people here are either by tradition or just, you know, have been born Catholics. So it's a bit different. And as well, you know, often people feel that it's an American church and they wonder, well, you're Irish, why have you joined this American church? So sometimes I need to clear that up.
You told me that the population there is quite youthful and transient, and so people who do join often move away. What's that like for your branch there?
Well, it's exciting when new people join, you know, because it's always good to meet new people. But yeah, in a way, you're excited for them when they move on, finish their degree, get the new job they always wanted. But then it's a little disappointing that you always have to keep saying goodbye to these great people, you know.
Do church members there in Ireland feel a little bit ostracized or isolated in that the pub is so much a way of life there in that country? Is that hard on people?
I think it depends. I think certainly if you're a convert, I mean, for most converts, their life has been around the social scene in Cork anyway, which, yeah, there would be a large amount of going to the pub. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that people are drinking hard, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, the whole night out often starts or ends at the pub. But I think it's not alone just around the pub. I think a lot of, you know, sports activities, like our national games, GAA games, that's the Gaelic Athletic Association, hurling, these kind of national games that are only played here. A lot of those sports actually are played on Sunday. So that's difficult sometimes for people if they are sportsmen and they give up their whole interest there to join the church, you know.
Now, I know that you've said there are many blessings that you've experienced. But what has come from you being a member of the church? And I know you were baptized almost 30 years ago. Yeah.
I suppose one of the things that really has, I think, helped me develop as a member of the church is the church's phenomenal commitment to education. You know, like I'm involved in the Institute at the moment. I've had callings in primary, in young women's, and through all the callings, you know, you get your manual, you get your training. We have had teacher training classes over the years. One time I was called as the employment specialist, and the church sent me on a number of training seminars to the UK.
So you've learned a lot then through your callings in service.
Oh, yeah, really developed, you know, I'm more confident about public presentation, you know, speaking in public, about meeting people. And actually, you know, one of the things I've become more confident about is I was a person who only sang in the car or the bath, you know.
Thanks so much for Skyping with us today, Marguerite. Good being with you.
Thanks, Michelle. It's been a pleasure.
It's always interesting to hear how the missionary effort is going in various parts of the world, and that's why we love to share missionary letters with you. Today's letter comes from Elder Braden Bangerter, serving in the South Africa Cape Town mission.
Our area is on fire. We got 12 new investigators this week by tracking and working with the members. It is awesome. Our days are packed from 10 in the morning to 9 at night. An appointment every hour on the hour. We don't even have time for lunch sometimes. This is all right with me. This work is awesome. Elder Braden Bangerter, South Africa Cape Town Mission.
We love hearing from our missionaries, and if you have a letter and pictures that you'd like to share with us, send them to mormontimestv@ksl.com. In the early days of the church, temple expansion was slow. Only one temple at a time would be built, and sometimes many years would go by before a new temple would be announced. But in 1972, the church dedicated an unprecedented 2 temples in the same year. Today, Chad Hawkins shares the history of the Ogden and Provo temples.
The Ogden and Provo temples are the 14th and 15th temple in the church. They are the first temples to be built in Utah since the Salt Lake Temple, which was built nearly 80 years previously. The church population along the Wasatch Front had grown significantly, and the need for these temples was great. David O. McKay conducted a study on temples and temple work. The study indicated that 52% of all of the temple work was being done in only 3 of the church's temples. And those temples were the Logan Temple, the Salt Lake Temple, and down south in the Manti Temple. And the study also suggested if the church would build 2 new temples along the Wasatch Front, that temple work could literally double. They chose to put the temples in Ogden and Provo because this is where it would benefit most of the church's members. They built the temples at the same time, and they began searching for temple sites also at the same time. In Ogden, they had many different sites to choose from. One by one, because of different criteria, they checked off these temple sites, and they came down to just 2 temple sites. One of them was actually located directly across from Weber State College, and they went to investigate this temple site. It was a beautiful large site, but it had just barely been purchased for the new McKay D Hospital, which was built on that location. So they went to the second site, and this site seemed to be perfect. It was in downtown Ogden. The church already owned the property, and it was right next door to the existing tabernacle. The Provo Temple also had many site options, and since the Ogden Temple had been announced that it would be built in downtown Ogden next to the tabernacle, many people thought naturally the Provo Temple should also be built in downtown Provo next to its existing tabernacle. But when they visited a second site, which was high up on the east bench, it was so beautiful, it was available, it was right next to the Brigham Young University campus, that's where they decided to build the temple. Temple architect Emil Fetzer tried to come up with a design that would allow for the most efficient way to perform temple work. This efficient design worked very well, and so as these temples were being built, costs were saved because they were being built at the same time. Many of the same contractors, many of the same materials were being used, and then finally when the temples were built and dedicated, these temples were so efficient that they could actually perform as much temple work or more in a single day than the previous larger temples. These 2 temples set the stage for many temples to follow along the Wasatch Front. From the north, you have Brigham City, then the Ogden Temple, then the Bountiful Temple, the Salt Lake Temple, Jordan River, Draper, Oquirrh Mountain, continuing further south, the Mount Timpanogos, the Provo Temple, another Provo Temple, and then the Payson Temple.
Thanks, Chad. And for temple-related products and pictures, including artwork by Chad Hawkins, go to ldstemplestore.com. Today on our Facebook page, we're giving away a signed copy of temple sketches done by Chad Hawkins of both the Ogden and the Provo temples. So if you're interested in having one of these pictures, go to facebook.com/MormonTimesTV and tell us why these temples are special to you. Well, thanks for joining us today on Mormon Times, and enjoy the rest of your Sabbath day.